Always such a pleasure to have our senior minister emeritus, Dr. Forbes, in our pulpit. Happy homecoming, everyone, and welcome back to Riverside Church. I believe that fifth grade was my favorite year of school ever, and that's saying a lot for someone who basically went to school nonstop till she was 40. I love that particular year of school, though, because every single day for several months, we spent an hour in the afternoon playing the game, the Oregon Trail. I've learned that the Oregon Trail is now a computer game, but back in the day, we played it old school with pencils and paper. The game is designed to teach players about the realities of 19th century pioneer life. So we were divided into teams and we had to adopt the life situation of a group of settlers prepared to travel from Independence, Missouri to Oregon's Willamette Valley on a covered wagon in 1848. Some of you who are familiar with the game will know that you start out with a certain amount of money, and you have to make investments in supplies like food or ammunition or items to trade that you believe will sustain your covered wagon for the whole long journey to Oregon. Every afternoon, our group would gather in a circle in the classroom. We would roll dice and draw cards that would determine how far we could go that day, depending on the circumstances. So your wagon could get sick, and you would have to decide to leave someone behind or drop out altogether. Or one of your oxen could die, slowing your wagon down. Or the weather could snow in your covered wagon for a month, and your food supplies would dwindle. The camp might be attacked. So you get the idea. The goal of the game, of course, was to make it all the way to Oregon with enough resources to claim land and to settle there. In fifth grade, we played the Oregon Trail and we learned about the history of America's westward expansion. What we didn't know we were learning then was that the systemic theft of land from Native peoples is an American value, and that we've all been indelibly impressed with a kind of rugged individualism that informs our American psyche. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but today Jesus is undermining American exceptionalism yet again. And the message we're presented with should make us all deeply uncomfortable and hopefully convicted enough to take radical action. If you've been with us the last few weeks in worship, this shouldn't surprise you. We've been on the way with Jesus, trying to imagine what it might have been like to be one of Jesus' first disciples, those who had given up their lives to follow him. But Jesus was forever confusing them. He didn't talk about political power or financial security, well, ever. He did talk about taking up a cross and building beloved community and forgiving over and over and over and over again. Some people who heard Jesus just walked away shaking their heads. Jesus' strange ideas were never going to make Jerusalem great again. But some disciples kept listening. They kept trying to understand. They kept tripping over themselves and then getting up and trying again. If you are in the second group, if you are still on the way with Jesus, open to having your heart and your life changed by his challenging message, well, let's listen closely. Today's gospel passage has been commonly titled, "The Parable of the Laborers." And it appears on the surface to be a fairly innocuous little story. But as we know, titles can be misleading, and I find it's pretty safe to say that if you read one of Jesus' parables and you feel vindicated or even comfortable, then you've probably read it wrong. As Clarence Jordan says, whenever Jesus told a parable, he lit a stick of dynamite and covered it with a story. But let's review. The kingdom of heaven is like, Jesus began, which meant something like the world that God imagines for us is like a landowner. A landowner who needed some folks to work in his vineyard. Maybe the regular crew was on vacation or didn't show up. Maybe it was harvest time and he needed all hands on deck. Whatever the case, the landowner went into the village early in the morning to find some laborers who would work for the day in his vineyard. He'd pay them fairly, generously even, so they came back with him to the vineyard and started their day's work. A little later that same day, the landowner could see there was quite a bit of work left to do, and he remembered the crowd of people waiting, just waiting for an opportunity to work. So he went back into the village, and he invited more people to come and work. And you know how it goes. The same thing happened again at noon, and then late in the afternoon, and then at 5. The landowner kept inviting more people to come and work in the vineyard. When the bell rang for the end of the workday, can you help me, bell choir? Somebody? Thank you. The landowner instructed his manager to line everyone up to receive their pay. The folks hired last, first. And so there they were, lined up to be paid, folks who began at 5 p.m. at the very front of the line. And as instructed by the landowner, the manager paid the first set of workers, those who had been on the job for just a few hours, a full day's wage. I mean, they were probably surprised, but they weren't going to complain about that. So they made their way past the others waiting in line, and you know how it goes. Word begins to trickle out. The landowner paid the very last workers a full day's wage. There at the end of the line were those who had started before the sun even came up that morning. They couldn't contain their excitement. If the workers who had worked just a few hours were paid a full day's wage, well, they were set to make more money than they ever thought possible. Jackpot. So the folks who began at noon go to the front of the line and they're paid a full day's wage. And the folks who began at 9 and worked all day long in the beating sun, sweating and tired and dirty and exhausted, they got to the front of the line, and you guessed it, the manager paid them a full day's wage. They were incensed, furious. This isn't fair. And maybe this is how the parable has always been explained to you as it has to me. It doesn't matter if you come to God early or late. God has enough grace and forgiveness and generosity for everybody. Perhaps I should just say amen here and we can pack up and head out to our after worship activities and welcome our new members. That would be so nice, wouldn't it? But don't forget, when Jesus tells a parable, he's lighting a stick of dynamite and covering it with a story. Let's look again. It's going to be helpful to start if we look at this parable in context. So if you want to look with me, you can take those blue Bibles and turn to about page 21, 22 at the back of the Bible. Right before Jesus tells this story, Peter, the disciple who always forgot to think before he spoke out loud, was busy pointing out to Jesus that he had given up everything to follow Jesus. He'd given up way more than the other people, and so he just wanted to be sure that Jesus knew he expected a reward. And right after this parable, the mother of James and John, two other disciples, tried to get Jesus to promise her sons powerful positions in his upcoming administration. Everybody was thinking about me instead of we, what am I going to get out of this whole thing? So I hate to say it, but maybe Jesus' story wasn't what we thought it was. Let's review. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. A landowner. We thought the landowner in the parable was God, but what if the landowner is us? What if Jesus is asking that our lives be transformed in such a way that we actually live out the dream God has for the world with our very own lives? Because I don't think Jesus is talking here about the question that is consuming the laborers, what is fair and what isn't fair. Instead, Jesus is talking about what is possible. About you and me shedding the constructs of this world that limit the ways in which we interact with each other and the world around us. About opening up possibilities for wholeness and generosity, expansiveness in relationship, maybe that we never thought of before. After all, it's the landowner who's behaving in a new way, not the laborers. It wouldn't make any sense at all for an employer to set up a system of compensation that doesn't reflect hours worked. You'd never be able to find laborers to work in your vineyard if you did that. How could you motivate employees or produce product or make a profit? This doesn't compute. And it surely doesn't align with our good old-fashioned American individualism and Protestant work ethic. Stick of dynamite. Remember? Jesus is saying here, the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who finally realizes that everything he has, his money, his influence, his power, his business, does not belong to him. The only thing that belongs to him is his neighbor. The only thing that belongs to him is his neighbor. The only thing that belongs to us is our neighbors. As some of you know, I grew up in the Hawaiian Islands. My father is a native Hawaiian activist and community organizer. I don't often speak Hawaiian in the pulpit or talk about the rich heritage that formed me, but today is our 4th homecoming Sunday together. It's probably time you knew a little more about the culture of my island home, as it was implanted on my psyche right along with all the lessons I learned playing the Oregon Trail. In short, island communities have a unique way of living together, perhaps for the simple fact that when you live on an island, you have to figure out how to get along, to take care of each other, or everybody dies. My father taught us that there is no word in the Hawaiian language for right, as in, this is my right, this is what I deserve. The only word in the Hawaiian language for talking about what belongs to me is kuleana, which means responsibility. The island community was driven by a sense of responsibility to each other because when we start talking about our rights, about personal acquisition over the sustainability and flourishing of the whole, that always leads to the death of the community. The ancient Hawaiians knew they lived in a fragile environment and they could only prosper if they paid attention to our kuleana, to our responsibility. Jesus knew this too. That's why he told the story of the landowner and insisted that the question we should always be asking is not what is fair, but rather, what is possible? What is possible for us all when I remember that the only thing that belongs to me is my neighbor. A fragile environment. That sounds familiar. The world you and I live in is rife with fragility. It hurts to read the news, and that's just the truth. The times in which we're living make us want to hoard what we have and close our doors and build big walls and use nuclear codes and make sure that I don't have to pay for anybody else's health care. Instead of looking at our responsibility, we let fear divide us from each other. But when we're on the way with Jesus, we don't ask the question, what is fair, anymore. Instead, we think about our kuleana, about what is possible, and we invest generously in the life of justice-making communities like this one. And we turn down invitations, and we take the knee, and we risk our livelihood in the name, and we name evil systemic injustice, and we insist that dreamers belong here with us. And together, we muster all the resources we can to help those who have been devastated by natural disasters. And we generously contribute to good health care for everyone. And so many other things. You watch the news like I do. Because we know that the only thing that belongs to me and the only thing that belongs to you is our neighbor, is each other. In 1959, when Hawaii became the 50th state in these United States, speaking of systemic theft of land from Native peoples, the new state chose as its motto this phrase, "Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono." Mary, you want to say it with me? Ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. The life of the land is sustained in rightness. The flourishing of our shared lives only happens when we exercise our responsibility toward each other. Or as Jesus might say, the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who looked out over everything he had and realized that the only thing that belonged to him was his neighbor. We have come home to this community today, and Jesus is asking us to keep walking on the way with him, to be justice makers in this world first, by turning inward and asking ourselves, what belongs to me? What really belongs to me? Then turning outward with open hands and open hearts, because we know that the only thing that truly belongs to me is you. Amen.